Let me talk about the problem with individualism because that is definitely at play here. People in other countries ask why we have end dates to our boycotts. Why don't we boycott until things change, right? Because that is how boycotts typically work. That is where they're really effective. Is you keep boycotting until something actually changes. The mass blackout and the we ain't buying it over Black Friday weekend had an end date, and end dates do make boycotts less effective for sure. However, the problem is in America, for a boycott that's this broad and encompassing of big corporate, streaming, ad platforms, and even asking people to not work, people will not participate without an end date. People didn't participate with an end date, right? So we as a country do not have a sense of community or collective responsibility, which is a problem. This is why liberals and centrists complain, but they don't actually participate in left-leaning solidarity efforts. Because by and large, liberals and centrists want to maintain the status quo and they want to maintain their own privilege and power, but they don't necessarily want to fight for the liberation of all and the liberation of the most oppressed. The most oppressed typically being groups that they are not part of. Most people, in general, as Americans and as the society that we have developed into, are only willing to maybe participate in issues only as far as it affects them and only as far as it is not too inconvenient for them. Again, this is not just liberals and centrists, this is everybody. Hence my stance on the No King's March being nothing more than an ineffective party that was conveniently timed. And by conveniently timed, I mean it was timed to be convenient for the people that you're protesting, supposedly not protesting because there was no call to action. And it was specifically planned to be non-disruptive, as well as planned in collaboration with police and getting protest permits and things like that. That means that you are in alignment with the authority. If your effort does not disrupt or impact those who you are speaking to, it is not effective. The mass blackout and the we ain't buying it boycotts are different because they are intended to be disruptive. They are intended to have economic impact. Now, at this time, I have not found stats on how effective it was economically, like what the stats were for sales over that weekend. And I think it's probably going to take some time. It's also kind of hard to calculate that because there are people who just bought big corporate before or bought big corporate after and just abstained during that period. But then the numbers are still going to be showing in a positive for these companies. So it's kind of hard to gauge it, but the point is that it was intended to have an economic impact. Now, aside from being a society that is very individualistic minded and not wanting to give up conveniences, which by the way is by design, we have moved from a collective community minded people to individualism and the nuclear family decades ago. Now that shifted us from caring about each other in a communal sense to caring about ourselves individually or our own tiny little family unit, which means that we do not have support systems in place for the disadvantaged, the under-resourced, the poor, or the disabled to really be able to fully participate in efforts like this, on top of which people don't want to give up their inconveniences. Now, people can't just not show up to work without a community system to make sure that they and their family will be taken care of if they get fired. Now, that is an extreme example. Here's a simpler one. Most people don't have community support systems in place to even make sure that they can eat if the only grocery options are a big box. And that is the situation I was in with this boycott. For me, where I live, the only options for food that has the options that I need for what I eat, and I do have limitations in my diet because of my health, because of my disabilities. So I do have to be very mindful and careful about what I eat and the quality of the food. The only real food options in this area are big corporations, Giant, Safeway, Aldi, and there aren't any independently owned grocery stores or even smaller grocery stores that actually have the kind of selection that I need. It's more like convenience stores, little corner stores. And that's cool, but I can't get my produce from a corner store over here. The other thing is that these grocery store options that I also have no way of shopping them without Instacart. I don't have a car. The transportation, even doing public transportation, which in Chicago would have been really easy, which is where I'm from, I don't have that option here. So the public transportation system is not robust. and it still involves a 15-minute walk or to one bus or a 35-minute walk to another bus. Now, because I have ankylosing spondylitis and I have chronic pain and limitations in that kind of transportation by foot, I can't do public transportation that involves that much walking carrying heavy groceries. I also cannot walk the 20-25 minutes to the grocery store, grab those groceries, and carry that kind of weight back to my house. So the only option for me to get groceries is both big corporations, and also having to use something like Instacart to get those groceries. I don't have a community support system around me that is like, hey, how do we make sure that these people have food? How do we make sure that if we're not doing big corp, that these people who don't have the resources, these people who don't have cars, that they're able to access food? You know, a community support system might look like groups going to the grocery store or going to an independently grocery store for people who have cars to be able to go do that and bring food back. I don't have that kind of system in place. And like by and large, most people don't have that kind of system, community care in place either, which is why community care is so important.